Adrian, welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you a spoiler-free review of The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell by Chris Colfer. This is the first book in a 6-part children/middle grade series which follows fairy tales. There's nothing better than fairy tales, whether you're a child or you're an adult. We all can appreciate fairy tales in one way or another. Let me start off by saying this. There are not many middle grade books that I read and enjoy as an adult, and my kids also enjoy as children. This one was one that my entire family, including my husband, was sucked into, and we could not put it down. A good chunk of my viewers are like me and they are moms of young/middle grade children, and this one is a really good one if you are looking for a book to read together with your entire family, because we were all sucked in. But enough about that. Let me give you my thoughts and opinions, some pros and cons of the book, what I thought about it. I hope that this will help you deciding whether or not this is a middle grade book that will suit you and your reading needs. The Wishing Spell follows 11 and soon to be 12-year-old twins Alex and Connor, and Alex and Connor are not doing very well. About a year ago, their dad tragically passed away, and since then their mom has been having to work double shifts in order to be able to support their family. They've had to leave their childhood home because they couldn't afford it anymore, and they don't have very many friends at school. Alex and Connor grew up with their grandmother and their father always reading to them fairy tales and telling them life lessons from fairy tales that they've learned, and so the story picks up in their English class. And Connor is the kind of kid that doesn't really like school very much. He falls asleep in class all the time. Alex is the kid who has all the answers. Sort of like a young Hermione Granger, if you will. They have to write a report about fairy tales and the lessons to be learned about fairy tales, which right off the bat was something that my kids absolutely loved because they never really thought about those kinds of things. And soon after is their 12th birthday. Their mom isn't going to be home with them on the 12th birthday because she has to work, but their grandma pays them a visit and she gives them a storybook called The Land of Stories. And this storybook happens to be a portal into the Land of Stories, and Alex and Connor find themselves in the Land of Stories having all kinds of crazy adventures. We see a good deal of the major fairy tale characters in this book, and it takes place after all these fairy tales have happened. We also see lots of interaction between all these fairy tale characters, and it was just a great thing to read. I, as an adult, found lots of things that I found humorous that my kids didn't get yet because they hadn't read all of the fairy tales. My kids loved it because it was an action-packed adventure suitable for their age group. It was just a great read for the entire family. Let's start off by talking about the writing. This one is one that kind of has pros and cons. My kids are 9 and 7, and they also are bilingual, so their vocabulary isn't quite up to the standard English vocabulary, I think, of the average English-speaking child. I don't know for certain, but I do realize that there are some words in there that they don't understand. There were some words in here that were a little bit on the higher level for a 9-10-year-old, even if English is their first language. So some of the things they kind of missed. However, the pro to that is they did learn some new words because they often had me stop and ask me what a word meant, which was really great for them. I think that reading books that are a little above their vocabulary level is a good challenge for them to learn new words and to broaden their vocabulary. So while it kind of hindered them a little bit in that they didn't always understand exactly the details of what was going on, they did learn a lot of new vocabulary words, which was great for them. And that also made it more interesting for me as an adult. I didn't feel like I was reading a children's book. Kind of on the same note, there were a couple of times that words were used that my children are not allowed to say. One of them is the word damn, which isn't a huge big deal, but my kids are not allowed to say it. So I try to stay away from books where they're used because my kids are young and I don't want them to learn that they're allowed to say these words at a young age. I don't want my kids saying bad words in the school and getting in trouble for it. But this one, I think it used it just 1 or 2 times, and so the story was so good that I could overlook it. I wish that he didn't put those words in there, but what are you gonna do? You can't please everybody. As far as the plot goes, this was an action-packed book, and again, it has pros and cons. As an adult, I did find it a little bit predictable, as in I sort of knew what the outcome would be, but I never knew how, and I was always guessing. My husband and I had these theories that when the kids weren't listening, we would go back and forth to who we thought was who in the story and how we thought the story would end, and we sort of got there, but we always seemed to be changing our opinion, which means that it wasn't entirely as predictable as I thought it was, which was nice. The adventure in the book was great for the kids. It was a page turner. There are not many children's books that are page turners, and I have to commend Chris Colfer for writing such a good book. There are 2 main themes that I think were really, really well done in this book. The first one is the true meaning of fairy tales. We see a lot of this, especially in the beginning of the book, where we're learning about what the fairy tales actually mean. And like I said earlier, it made my kids really think about it. It made me really think about it. And I think it was great life lessons for kids. This book also deals really heavily with not being afraid of who you are and being courageous and stepping outside your boundaries and using your brains and puzzle solving. And I think they're all great things for young children to be reading about. And then we've got the characters. There are so many characters in this book. We see Sleeping Beauty, we see Rapunzel, we see Cinderella, we see the Little Red Riding Hood, we see the Big Bad Wolf, we see the Fairy Godmother, we see Goldilocks, we see the Frog Prince, we see Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, and they all have their own little twists that you wouldn't exactly expect from them. I can't talk about all these characters because there's so many, it would just take forever. But let's talk about Alex and Connor because they are the characters that we see throughout the entire book. Alex is your typical book nerd. She knows a lot, she's very smart, she's her teacher's favorite, but she's also a little bit awkward, and because of that she doesn't have that many friends in school. Her brother Connor is the exact opposite. While he is intelligent, he doesn't try very hard. School really isn't his thing, and he also doesn't have very many friends at school. The two of them kind of stick together and they're just this close-knit brother-sister duo. I found both of them to be very relatable to their age. A lot of times you'll see 11, 12-year-old kids acting way above their age level, and these were just your typical sort of sheltered children who love stories, and they reminded me kind of like my own kids because my own kids aren't allowed to do any crazy things. They're not really interested in crazy things. My oldest is definitely the book smart kind of nerd, and my youngest is sort of more like Connor, so I found myself relating to these two children in my own kids, which was interesting. Connor was also the humor in the story. He was very sarcastic, he made a lot of jokes. Some of them got a little bit old after a while, I will say that, but they definitely brought some humor in and made me giggle a lot of times, made my kids giggle. But the fact that these two characters related to me and to my children was really well done. Overall, the thing that gets me the most excited about this book is that it is a family-friendly, wholesome children/middle grade fiction fantasy book, which is very hard to come by these days. At least the books that I've been reading anyway, I've always found them to be problematic in one way or another, which doesn't mean that they're bad books. They're just not suitable for my family at the stage that they're at right now. As my kids get older, things will change. But this was a good book that I enjoyed as an adult, my children enjoyed as young children, and I found acceptable to them. We will be reading this entire series. I can't wait to get to the next one. It was such a great book. Again, if you have not read this series and you love middle grade books, you really should pick this one up because it was fantastic. I could go on and on and on and gush about this series, but I'm not gonna because this video is already long enough. If you have read this series, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you have not yet, I would love for you to subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye!